Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Brian, and I am here with my monthly review, audio review, not video. Well, it is going to be put on my YT channel and on the YT site. But anyway, I'm here with my review of Sonic the Hedgehog issue 197. Now, I know this might sound a little ridiculous to some of you, but you've probably have seen it as but you've probably done this as well. Even though I got my issue today slash yesterday, because right now it's 12:37 in the morning, early Saturday morning. Basically, it's 12:37 even in the morning. 37 minutes, 35 minutes after midnight. I got this on basically today slash yesterday, which was Friday. Anyway, getting into what I'm saying, and is that you've probably already, like me, you've probably already read this issue before you got it. In other words, you probably saw it here on the YT or on some other video sites or even some certain picture or photo sites. You've probably already read the comic. And, well, I have to say personally, I do agree with what some of the people have said on certain forums and on these video sites and here on the YT and on certain Sonic sites. I have to say it definitely answered a lot of good questions. For example, we started out with the preview pages that we saw and everything. And we always wondered, I'm pretty sure when we first heard about the previews, about the fact that Sally was going on trial, we wondered what the hell was going on. Why is she going on trial? And we kind of had our suspicions, and then we find out, as far as I'm concerned, as from what I've read, it sounds like it was more Hamlin's idea here to put this trial together than I think anybody else's. Maybe Rosemary had a little bit of help in that, but then again, I think it was mostly all Hamlin. And basically, to me, I think Hamlin just, was just trying to find a way. I guess to me, the Hamlin character basically had a lot of bitterness in him, and I think he just took it upon himself to say, hey, you know, you did something you shouldn't have done, and this is the consequences. So basically, to me, I think what Ian did by writing this story is he made Hamlin sort of into a bitter character, basically someone that's upset at the fact that, as we find out later on, as we know, if you've read the comic book for a long time like I have, and have read the spin-offs like, say, the Princess Sally miniseries, you might remember that Sally, as she mentions here, along with Hamlin, that she helped train him along with Penelope and Dylan, and I can't think of the other two that she trained as well. And like I said, I think Rosemary had a little bit of say in this as well, had a little bit of wanting to get this trial going as well, because I believe, and I've mentioned this on the Mobius forum, that perhaps it was the motherly instincts in her that probably wanted to help, wanted to get this trial going, because maybe she didn't want to have her son put in danger. Although that's not mentioned in this issue, I think that's exactly why maybe her character was put into this situation. Now, I do have to agree that Ian did a terrific job by basically having Hamlin kind of counteract Sally with everything Sally was trying to explain. Like, Sally's trying to tell Hamlin and the council, hey, I created the Pacific Sonic's punishment and sent him on a mission. In other words, she's trying to tell Hamlin and the council that, hey, it was the council's decision to allow me to come up with the idea in Pacifics for Sonic's punishment, and my idea was to send him to Mobius to probably counteract what the Suppression Squad was doing on their planet. Now, she does mention in the first few pages that she did this under her authority as a field leader. Now, as I mentioned, Ian did a great job by having Hamlin's character counteract her by saying, yes, I agree, you did it by a field leader authority, but you didn't do it as your authority as a princess. And that basically without using your authority as a princess, you have no power outside of that. And Sally, as we read on, she says, "Yeah, well, since my brother's the king, of course I don't." And then, and again, I give Ian a lot of credit by doing this counteraction with Hamlin, where he just comes straight to the point and tells Sally, "Hey," I'm just going to use a few lines here, where he basically tells Sally, "So let me get this straight. You made your decision as a field leader of the freedom fighters, a group that answers directly to the Council of Acorns." So basically what he's saying is that Sally has just admitted to Hamlin and the council that yes, the council did give her authority, and we're going to find that out. We found that out a few pages later, to do what she had to do, but didn't give her full authority as a field leader to, allow Sonic or the Freedom Fighters to go into Mobius. That basically he's saying she went against direct orders. Something that Sonic would probably do, right? Maybe Sonic's rubbing off on her. I don't know. Now the whole thing with the no zone, at least we now know exactly where a criminal like Scourge goes when they get arrested. They go to the no zone, and apparently we find out as well that there's more than just one zone cop, and besides which, Sonic is, there's more zone cops. There's a zone cop version of SBO, there's a zone cop version of Vector, and who knows who else. And basically overall, I thought the situation in No Zone was pretty good. I like the idea how Ian adds in the aspects that the reason the No Zone or the Zone Cop's homeworld is in ruins is because of Eggman Naga, who unfortunately right now, I guess due to certain reasons, cannot officially appear in this comic book, but I think appears in Sonic Universe. Now, basically, Sonic Universe, and I'll talk about a little bit more about that later. Now we go back to the situation with Sally and the council, to where Sally basically has to explain, like I mentioned earlier, that the reason she sent Sonic on a mission was because it was the council's decision to punish Sonic, and that most of that punishment was up to her, so that anything she had told Sonic to do, in a way, was already approved by the council. Now Hamlin tries to counteract this by saying we would never approve of anything that undermined our own authority. And Sally has to point out that then why the two counselors, that being Sir Charles and Rotor, Sir Charles being Uncle Chuck, why did they help her build the star post? And again, like I said, Ian does a great job here with the situation with Hamlin by having him counteract by saying those star posts are meant to go to the special zone in which there was an ongoing mission, and that the counselors that helped her fall under her command as field leader, and that basically she's just trying to justify her actions, her rogue actions. Now Sally basically has to tell Hamlin with her own counteract at this that, hey, there was no larger invasion planned and by us. We were not planning to invade the Mobius world. That instead there was an opportunity that presented itself, and they acted, and by doing so, by seizing this opportunity, Freedom HQ is now theirs again. The Suppression Squad is back on their world, back on their world now, and they can once again focus on the task at hand. Now Hamlin basically, again, out of his bitterness and anger at the fact that even though he was trained by Sally, Allie, and everything, comes out and says, hey, those ends don't justify the means. If you accept, basically he's saying, hey, if we accept what you just said, then that means you could do whatever you want in the name of the greater good, and we become redundant. In other words, Hamlin is basically telling her already, although we don't find that out until later on, that, hey, you keep doing what you do. If you keep doing this, then we, the council, will become forgotten, just like I was, along with Dylan and Penelope and all the other substitute freedom fighters that you trained. Now, as Sally admits that she's guilty, goes like, basically, fine, I'm guilty, and Hamlin wants to kind of move forward. She finally does remind the council of this, that if this is the case, if you do find me guilty, if you want to put me in jail, if you want to put me on probation, know this: I will not act under any I will not give any order, even in a time of battle. I will not do anything unless I get direct approval of the council. Now she goes on to say, and I will mention this in part 2. Now, as I was saying, because I left off to the point that after she tells the council, fine, I'm guilty, and Hamlin wants to kind of move on to probably put her behind bars or put her on probation, Sally basically says, but know this. If you do find me guilty, if you put me behind bars, if you put me on probation, or if you just give me a warning, if you just let me off right now, but want to keep a watchful eye on me, she basically tells them, fine, you guys want to find me guilty of treason? Here's what I'll do. I'll remain a freedom fighter, but I will not give any command. I will not give any direct order, even if it's in times of battle or in the middle of a battle. I will not do anything unless I get direct approval from you guys. Then she goes on to say, with the exception of the chaotics who are out of our jurisdiction, I will not give any order whatsoever. But then she goes out to point that even before the council was formed, she doesn't really say all this, but she basically goes out to tell them that even before the council was formed, even before New Mobotropolis was formed, even before the substitute freedom fighters was formed, even before everything that's taking place now in this issue, she goes on to remind them that she has been defending her people for a long time, and that because of this, they can either have her answer directly to them before she does anything, even in the middle of a fight, or they can trust her in the decisions that she makes, because she, as she has mentioned in this issue, would never do anything to endanger her people. Now, basically, by giving this heartfelt speech, if you will, or not heartfelt speech, but basically giving this reasonable speech and reasonable counter as to why they shouldn't really find her guilty, the council does say, okay, basically does agree to drop the charges and the investigation, leveled at her, except for Hamlin. And then we find out later on, when Sally asked Hamlin why, because he used to be one of her freedom fighters, Hamlin goes on to basically say, look, I was one of your substitute freedom fighters, trained by you, by the best, who is one of the best, but even though I was trained by you, you have left me behind. You have left me and everybody else that you trained behind and forgotten. Basically, basically to Hamlin, he's just telling her, hey, out of all those missions you have gone on, you never really called upon us to help you out. You never called upon me to help you out. So that is why, as Hamlin points out, I ran for counselor, to be part of this council. Because if I can't be on the field alongside you, fighting for the freedom of our people, then I will sit behind this big round desk and I will make sure you fight for them correctly. Now Sally tries to tell him, hey, you were never forgotten. You were always one of us. But Hamlin basically says, hey, don't placate me. And as I mentioned, he tells her, I ran for office so I can make a difference. Because if I can't make a difference on the field fighting for them, I'll make a difference. I'll make a difference by being as a counselor and making decisions that are correct for the people. Now, to me, I believe this is hints to maybe a corruption happening. I mean, I mentioned this before that this seems similar almost in some ways, maybe inspired in some ways, but what you saw in the George Lucas Star Wars films. I mean, let's take a look at the the prequel films, the first Star Wars 1, 2, and 3, and how the Chancellor got to where he was. I'm just saying. It seems that maybe some of this was inspired. Maybe it's just out of bitterness, but who knows? I'm not saying Hamlin, as I've mentioned probably on the Mobius forums, could be the traitor that Silver was talking about, but perhaps he could be one of the corrupt people that maybe someday gets impeached from the council and told to step down. I don't know. But I'm just saying. And it could also be out of bitterness, but then again, who knows? And as far as Rosemary goes, like I said, I don't know what's up with her agreeing with Hamlin, but I think maybe, even though, I think in a way like Hamlin didn't like having to let Sally off easy or dropping the charges on Sally. I think in a way it's more like a motherly instinct. Maybe she feels, maybe there's more to her than meets the eye with this whole situation. But then again, who knows? And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think the council is going to last much longer in these comic books. I don't think so. Now we go back to the zone, to the no zone, or the zone cop's homeworld. And like I mentioned earlier in part 1, we kind of get an explanation from Sonic as to why everything is taking place, why the zones are on lockdown. And as I mentioned earlier in part 1, he tells Sonic it's because of Naga, Eggman Naga, who has declared war on them. And then only a few zones have been open to keep Sonic's world stable, while the others have been locked down to keep Naga out of Sonic's world. And basically what we have in the end is we have Sonic and Sonic teaming up, beating down, finally defeating Scourge, putting a control collar on him so that his power, so he doesn't get out of control or whatever. Ever. And then we find out after all this time, because we've been asking this question, and I'm sure Ian's asked this question, as to why Eggman, formerly known as Robo Robotnik, was never taken back by Sonic. And Sonic basically explains to Sonic the Hedgehog that the reason for this is because Eggman, aka formerly Robo Robotnik, has an identical past to the Robotnik that Sonic defeated back in Endgame with up to a certain point. And that because of that, even though it's up to a certain point that they have an identical past, he is essentially the same Robotnik, and that he is needed for Sonic's world to be stable. And that basically Sonic Prime, Sonic the Hedgehog, has to fight a Robotnik, and that this Robo-Robotnik, aka Eggman, is the best candidate to fill in. And basically he also tells Sonic that the reason he had to bring Scourge in was because it made his mutation, courtesy of the Chaos Emerald, made Scourge a bit of a wild card in the cosmic things. Even though Scourge, as he's being hauled away, says, "Hey, you can call me whatever you want. The truth is, I'm Sonic the Hedgehog at his full potential." Now we have Sonic being escorted home from the no zone, and basically being reunited with his parents, and basically tell him, "Yeah, I have a minute." After they ask, if Scourge is safely put away, he says yes, and they ask, "Okay, do you have a minute to rest?" And he said yes, but now I got one more fight to go, and that's against Robotnik. And then speaking of Robotnik / Eggman, we have Snively communicating with Regina. Obviously a lot of people feel as though they know who she is. Robotnik's calling Snively, calling him by his first name, his birth name, which surprises him. Makes him wonder if maybe, Eggman is finally losing all his marbles, and that perhaps if that's the case, Regina's plan that he's working with her on could be accelerated. This could be the opportunity they look for until Snively discovers what Eggman, his uncle, if you will, has been working on, which turns out to be the Egg Phoenix. And apparently, this is going to tie into a 3-part story that starts next month. And then we have the side story of Sonic and the Black Knight, which to me could have been saved for Sonic Universe and might be continued on and adapted more onto Sonic Universe in the future. And, we see that the Knights of the Black Knight are Knuckles, Shadows, and Blaze. But anyway, overall, I have to say that issue 197 was done very well. Like I said, Ian did answer a lot of questions that we've been wanting answered for a long time. We find out that Hamlin has basically become bitter at the fact that even though Sally trained him and Dylan and Penelope and the others, that he feels as though even with that, they've always been forgotten and left behind. That basically, to me, the way Ian wrote Hamlin is not as wrote Hamlin is not just because not just as being bitter at the fact that he was always forgotten, but basically I think what he was doing was, in a way, allowing Hamlin a chance to, let all the frustration out that, towards Sally, like, hey, you trained us, but you never gave us the opportunity. Where was our opportunity? It was never there. That's basically what I think he was trying to do with Hamlin. And, the question that we've always wondered about the Eggman, why he was never taken back to the, his zone is because he's essentially the same person. So, but overall, I have to say Ian did a good job, and I give it a 5 out of 5, and that's all I can say about it.